Okay. Open the
Thank you. Thank you.
Acting Honourable House Chair.
Let us pray. Almighty God, where you have called us to govern this province, we ask your help to make decisions and laws that will be just and will promote the interests of our people. Almagtige God, ons bid dat u gedurende ons vergaderings ons die nodige wysheid sal gee en ons motiewe suiwer sal hou en dat u ons sal help om ons tekortkominge te oorkom en al ons besluite aan u op te dra. Sikilile ilezwe letu na bantu balo, umisele, ukulunga kwipondo letu. Nkosi sikilele i-Afrika, kina abantwana bayo, kokela en koklezi yazo, iniki ukolo i-Afrika. All this we beg in your holy name. Amen. You may be seated. Order members, good morning. Before we proceed, members, as you know, our practice to date as honourable members will be participating in this sitting of the House, both from here in the chamber with the presiding officer and the table staff and via Microsoft Teams. Our standing rules have accordingly been amended to accommodate such hybrid sittings of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. If a member of this provincial parliament elects to participate virtually and not from the chamber, it is such member's responsibility to ensure that he or she has good quality data connectivity for good quality audio and video and that there are no disturbances. The hybrid system has been functioning well and poor audio and or video is not attributed to this system, but rather the quality of data connectivity. Honourable members are at this point also reminded that no interjections are permitted during these hybrid sittings, and in this regard, I draw the attention of all members to Rule 40 of the Standing Rules. Members, we will now proceed to the orders of the day, and the Secretary will read the first order.
Vote 3, Provincial Treasury, Western Cape Appropriation Bill.
Thank you very much, Secretary. I now recognize the Honourable Minister, David Maynier.
House Chairperson, good morning, and good morning to all the members who have joined us here in the chamber this morning. Last week we tabled, as honourable members will know, a budget to push forward so that we can get up, so that we can get out, so that we can push forward and so that we can do even better in the Western Cape. And today we table the main budget for Provincial Treasury in the amount of 321.6 million rand for the 2022-23 financial year to deliver on 4 strategic objectives. And those are to the integrated provincial governance, efficient infrastructure investment, strategic supply chain management, and of course, effective local governance. Provincial Treasury continues to strengthen governance in the Western Cape through a rigorous strategic budget process, integrated management information, improving audit processes, and of course, integrated assurance. And Provincial Treasury is leading from the front to strengthen governance in the Western Cape, which is why in the last financial year, we had 84% of departments and public entities achieving clean audits, and why we remain top of provincial rankings when it comes to having the least irregular expenditure and the least fruitless and wasteful expenditure in South Africa. Provincial Treasury works hard to support departments and public entities And the results are testament, I think, to the strong financial governance in the Western Cape. Provincial Treasury have developed a rigorous strategic budgeting process, which is focused not just on the immediate spending pressures, but also on anticipating and accommodating future spending pressures and risks, which is why our Fiscal Futures project will evaluate the best options available to maintain the long-term fiscal sustainability of the provincial government in the Western Cape. And which is why we have allocated 1.8 million rand to better understanding the future fiscal trends to ensure fiscal sustainability in the Western Cape. To deal with spending pressures through proactive restructuring measures, we have established a fiscal transition support facility, which provides fiscal support for the once-off upfront costs of investment in new service delivery approaches and technology that will achieve long-term savings and improved outcomes over time. To support the implementation of specific departmental interventions that will achieve long-term savings for the department and improve outcomes, we have allocated 30.5 million rand over the medium term in the Western Cape. While we are in a better fiscal position now, there is of course a question about how long this will last, because there are very serious downside risks to the economic outlook in South Africa. Yes, we have been hard hit by the pandemic, but we do expect a gradual recovery. But of course, there are significant downside risks, and provincial budgets are unlikely to increase in real terms, despite the huge spending pressures building up in provinces across South Africa. The major risk to the South African economy over the last decade has been rising government expenditure without corresponding growth in economic output and productivity or efficiency, which is why we will continue to conduct expenditure reviews to assess the efficiency, effectiveness, and performance of selected programs in the Western Cape. To drive economic growth and create jobs, Provincial Treasury continues to support the efficient delivery of infrastructure in the Western Cape. The short-term benefits of expanding our infrastructure investment program will include jobs associated with investment activities, with longer-term benefits coming from greater productivity and, of course, competitiveness, which is why we have allocated a total of about 10 billion rand for investment in infrastructure in 2022-23 in the Western Cape. To push forward and achieve ambitious infrastructure growth, we must invest in the preparation of infrastructure projects so that we have a pipeline of shovel-ready infrastructure projects in the Western Cape, which is why last week I announced that we will allocate 87.7 million rand through the project preparation facility over the medium term, with about 34 million rand allocated in the 2022-23 financial year. To push forward, we must also get the infrastructure management system right, which is why we are now preparing to withdraw Provincial Treasury Instruction 16B, which will make the Department of Transport and Public Works the preferred but not the exclusive implementer of infrastructure in the Western Cape, which of course will bring much needed competition into the infrastructure space. And of course, because committees of this Parliament play a critical role in monitoring infrastructure expenditure in the Western Cape, we will provide consolidated quarterly reports on infrastructure performance, not just to the Budget Committee, but to other relevant committees, including the Standing Committee on Education, the Standing Committee on Health, and of course the Standing Committee on Transport and Public Works. We hope that these reports will support the committees to monitor infrastructure spending so that we can push forward in the Western Cape. Supply chain management reform obviously continues to play a critical role in sustaining financial capability maturity, driving value for money, and strengthening compliance with governance requirements in the Western Cape, which is why Provincial Treasury continues to support strategic procurement in the Western Cape by constantly evaluating our supply chains for opportunities to increase value for money while also ensuring compliance. To support and execute supply chain management reform, the Provincial Treasury has allocated an additional 3 million rand in the 2022-23 financial year and a further once-off allocation of 1.5 million rand in the 2022-23 financial year for supply chain management reform to drive value for money in the Western Cape. Additional technology support will focus on the enhancement to an automated procurement planning toolkit and the enhancement of data processing and business intelligence capabilities to provide insight into provincial procurement and therefore improve value for money in purchasing. Provincial Treasury House Chairperson also continues to lead the way in procurement transparency by being the first provincial government to disclose detailed information about COVID-19 related expenditure. We now publish a detailed monthly procurement disclosure report, a detailed quarterly procurement disclosure report, and we publish detailed annual procurement disclosure reports on COVID-19 related expenditure in the Western Cape. This week, we expect to publish our 21st procurement disclosure report on COVID-19 related expenditure in the Western Cape. To push forward and of course remain the most transparent province when it comes to procurement, we will also be exploring publishing approved procurement plans to provide potential suppliers with information about opportunities available to supply goods and services to provincial government. We will be exploring publishing detailed information of transactions on more commodities, and we'll be exploring implementing our own dashboard system for the disclosure of detailed information on procurement to supplement the system already utilized by National Treasury. As Chairperson, Provincial Treasury continues to support effective local government, working closely with vulnerable municipalities to manage risks and improve their financial stability. A good example of this is the financial recovery plan for the Beaufort West municipality. The plan, which was prepared by the Municipal Financial Recovery Service at National Treasury, is the result of extensive consultation. The plan adopts a strategic approach focused, which is time-bound and comprehensive enough to ensure that the underlying causes of the financial crisis are adequately addressed. To achieve this objective, the plan presents a phased approach to recovery, differentiating between issues to be addressed in the short, in the medium, and of course in the long term. The plan is divided into three distinct but independent phases. Phase 1, which is a rescue phase, Phase 2, which is a stabilization phase, and then of course Phase 3, which is the sustainability phase. And we anticipate that the municipality can achieve a cash-back funded budget position within 3 years, provided the measures outlined in the financial recovery plan are successfully implemented by the Beaufort West municipality. As Chairperson, in conclusion, I'm always so impressed by the professionalism, the dedication, and the innovation of Provincial Treasury. So I would also like to warmly congratulate one of our Provincial Treasury employees, Janine Mostert, for winning a Gold Award for the Inspirational Support Employee in the Best Researcher of the Year category at the recent 2022 Batu Pele Excellence Awards this week. Janine Mostert has been instrumental in contributing to the now regular production of the monthly, quarterly, and annual procurement disclosure reports, which is the gold standard, we believe, for procurement transparency in South Africa. She has also been the lead team member who designed the dashboard for the procurement disclosure reports, which will soon be launched by Provincial Treasury. I would also like to thank the Provincial Treasury's head official, David Savage, and all the Provincial Treasury officials from Team Finance for their incredible effort to deliver a budget to push forward so that we can get up, so that we can get out, so that we can push forward and do even better in the Western Cape. I thank you, House Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister Mania. I now recognize Honourable Mkontlo.
Thank you, Honourable Member and Speaker, for our session this morning. Addressing the 13th Nelson Mandela lecture, now almost 7 years ago, the French economist Thomas Piketty said, and I quote, "The fact that inequality today in some dimensions is higher in South Africa than what it was 20 years ago in terms of concentration of income is partly due to international factors which are not completely under the control of the South African government. The international community, broadly speaking, has a big responsibility for the situation of inequality in South Africa, in Africa, and the world in general," I end quote. In turn, Joseph Stiglitz writes in his book, The Price of Inequality, and I quote, "Markets by themselves, even when they are stable, often lead to high levels of inequality, outcomes that are widely viewed as unfair," close quote. For Stiglitz, the consequences of not taming and tempering the markets are serious because within meaningful democracies, where the voices of ordinary citizens are heard, we cannot maintain an open and globalized market system, at least not in the form that we know it, if the system year after year makes those citizens worse off. For its part, the Provincial Economic Review Outlook for 2021, commissioned by this provincial government, states that between 2012 and 2020, the Western Cape Gini coefficient increased from 0.60 to 0.63. In other words, a deepening of inequality in this province. Speaker, all of this comes in the aftermath of the World Bank report of inequality and the naming of South Africa as the most unequal society in the world. Every single public representative must therefore be seized with the urgency of addressing this man-made, yes, a man-made curse. We must not become defensive nor denialist. We must acknowledge that inequality, as explained by both Piketty and Stiglitz, is caused by unfettered markets, and we must recognize that. Based on the data, inequality indicates serious traces of race and gender in this country and province. Therefore, it becomes extremely challenging when a provincial government led by the DA wants us to deny race. It becomes exceptionally difficult when a provincial government wants to deny that the people of Bonteheuwel, Elsies River, Bongoleti, KwaNokuthula, Khayelitsha, and Gugulethu are worse off today than they were in 2009. Yet these communities are exclusively colored and African. Damaging impacts of geographical inequalities in opportunity and income are critical discussion in today's political mainstream. Even worse still, we have an MEC of Finance who stands up in this House and in his budget speech, no less defends the free market. Free markets condemned by international economists such as Thomas Piketty and Joseph Stiglitz, and a litany of literature around traditional economics. This House, as elected representatives of the people, must be interested in the inquiries questioning the benefits, distributional consequences, and pivotal interlinkages of growth strategies with the wider socio-economic environment, which are never adequately specified in GDP accounts and or GDPR. Where is the Fiscal Futures Project? Where is the Economic War Room to help us understand geographies of uneven development and inequality, their adverse and damaging impacts to social and labor market inequalities? How do these help us explore any new scale of governance and regulation that can reinforce rather than resolve the problems of uneven development and socio-spatial inequalities? These are the questions that we need to be asking as post our economic recovery, post-COVID environment. Speaker, the Western Cape Provincial Strategic Plan 2019 to 2024 states that the country's triple challenges of poverty, inequality, and unemployment has a disproportionate impact on women, with close to 42% of females living below the lower bound poverty line, compared to 38% of males. Even more so, the Provincial Strategic Plan declares, and I quote, "The structural nature of our economy means that inequality is itself a major challenge facing our economy. This means that concerted efforts need to be placed on ensuring that economic growth is inclusive, both in terms of gender and other demographics, and is targeted at both the formal and informal economy," end quote. It is therefore concerning that this budget vote in particular does not speak to the need to bring about mechanisms that will track in real terms progress made in the fight against poverty and inequality in this province. We received explanation from the provincial treasury officials on the ability to create data, but we have yet to see the real and tangible outcomes of this mapping and tracking of the success of this provincial government's fight against poverty and inequality. Again, the poor of this province have become poorer in the last decade. That is the reality, but there seems to be no consideration from the provincial treasury to ensure that this increase in inequality or poverty is monitored and measured. In other words, what this tangibly means is that the word inequality appears 32 times in the 2021 payroll, but only once in relation to the Western Cape. There is simply no readily available data on poverty and inequality in Western Cape, and if it does exist, this provincial government does not warrant it necessary to include it in the payroll. We find it absolutely necessary to insist on budget performance measures that are able to track and map interventions made by this provincial government in the fight against inequality and poverty. Without this budget performance mechanism or monitoring tool or tracing the interventions made by the provincial government, the Honorable August will be right that we are simply repeating the same budget year after year and not necessarily ensuring that what is being done is actually having an effect on the ground. On Friday, a member of the DA criticized the ANC for not giving concrete proposals and for missing the pot when it sits on it. Well, here are two tangible proposals to this provincial government. Make available the data you have on the interventions against poverty and inequality in this province. Using your mapping and tracking, report to us how much provincial funds is going per month into places such as Manenberg, into Khayelitsha, into Mitchells Plain, into Kayamnandi, into KwaNokutula, KwaNongqaba, etc. Develop models and strategies for sustainability that will mitigate risks emanating from the international market, which has the potential to impact negatively on the provincial economy, and that will likely deepen inequality and poverty if not mitigated. We were told of these risks, but we have yet to hear of the sustainability strategies or models that will mitigate these risks. In the light of this lack of reporting on poverty data here in the Western Cape, the ANC welcomes the envisaged quarterly reports on infrastructure investment and development starting in the new financial year. We look forward to contributing to these, ensuring that they become relevant to our communities and our people. As such, we ask for data regarding each skills transfer or skills development per project. Report on the participation of grade 1 to 3, grade 4 to 6 versus grade 7 to 9 as per CID grading, so that we can see how indeed there is a distributional benefit of this infrastructure and catalytic project to actually contribute to this issue of leveling the playing fields and dealing with uneven development and geographies in our province. Speaker, the ANC remains deeply concerned that the provincial treasury indicates very little commitment to redress and ensuring that the past injustices are corrected. The reality is that long before the Constitutional Court judgment on preferential procurement, this provincial treasury and provincial government have rejected race as determining factor in preferential procurement, even though statistics in terms of poverty, wealth inequality, income inequality, asset inequality prove that race is indeed a factor in as far as this phenomenon is concerned, even in this province. While the ANC continues to also insist on local content procurement and need for provincial treasury to espouse these principles, in the face of whether it is practical or not, we also note that the provincial treasury does not seem to be an attractive workplace for African women. We don't need to ask ourselves why. We know why. The Honorable America, for once, is right. The under-expenditure across this provincial government and in our municipalities must remain a critical issue for the provincial treasury. It is unacceptable that provincial treasury throws their hands up in the air when, for example, municipalities find it hard to access grants coming from national because of, again, red tape. Provincial Treasury, as far as artificial intelligence is concerned, is so willing to teach national a thing or two, and it must be willing to ensure that municipalities are able to easily access grants, especially when these grants benefit the poorest of our communities. In fact, we are told that grants allocated for infrastructure development, in particular, infrastructure so crucially needed by our poorer communities, are being clogged in red tape and therefore not accessed by our municipalities. The ANC will be following the developments in Beaufort West closely. We note that DA is concerned that Provincial Treasury not commit the same mistakes that it did in Canaland. Provincial Treasury officials acknowledge that the court judgment in Canaland matter insisted on the leading role of the National Treasury and it having the prerogative. The Honorable MEC for Local Government must therefore heed the sounds coming from Provincial Treasury and not get ahead of himself in thinking that he can commit the same misgovernance that he did in Canaland in Beaufort West. The ANC will certainly be watching the space and liaise with its national colleagues to ensure that the people of Beaufort West and not the DA benefits from this intervention. As we have learned from Canaland, the DA, led by the MEC for Local Government, who also happens to be the chairperson of DA in the province, uses this intervention to score cheap political points and destabilize municipalities where DA is not leading. The ANC will insist, as it did in Canaland, that DA-led province respects the constitutional functions and integrity of our municipalities, as they would claim those under DA and those not, including in Beaufort West. Speaker, the DA cannot just play around with our municipalities as it does and deal willy-nilly with them. In fact, already last year, the ANC raised the need for Provincial Treasury to develop methods in mitigating political interference and instability within our municipalities. Arrogant as they are, the DA-led Provincial Treasury did not deem it necessary to do so because they arrogantly thought that they would win all 30 municipalities in the Western Cape. Well, on November 1st, they got a blue bloody nose. And now we are sitting with at least 10 municipalities, if not more, that DA is continuously causing instability in because the people of those municipalities rejected them at the polls. The instability definitely has an impact on service delivery and budgets. The Provincial Treasury only now cites this political instability as a risk which should be mitigated. Yet they can simply mitigate this risk by asking their DA political leaders not to cause instability in collusion-run municipalities. The ANC remains convinced that a new department announcement by the Premier remains a hollow one. The MEC was at pains to describe on Friday past how he had spoken too much about the Municipal Economic Resilience Program when in fact he is a year late. Municipal Economic Resilience Program was not announced in his latest budget speech. It was announced last year, and we had to wait a year for the detail he comes to present this year. In the same way, we are told by the HOD of Transport and Public Works that the developments in the new departments and reforms will only be effected next year. And so, like the MAP and the LEAP, the people of the Western Cape will have to wait a whole year before we can know how the people's monies will be spent in the Western Cape. The ANC will reject this hollow budget. And we are saying, as the ANC, we do not support this budget vote. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Nkondlo. You are well within your time. Members, may I please ask, from where I am sitting, Member Maree, I can't exactly hear your conversation with Member Bringhuis, but your voice do echo to the front. So may I please ask that you refrain from doing that, please?
Speaker, sorry, are you saying that members in this house must be as quiet as a mouse? They can't even speak to a colleague. Is that what you're ruling?
Member Maree, can you please take your seat?
That's what the speaker should be.
What I am saying that your conversation is creating a disturbance in the house. Because if I can hear your voice, certainly other members can do so. So if you wish to conversate, you may do so, but please not to disturb the house. Thank you very much. Members, next up is Member Makamba Bocha. I've been informed that she is experiencing connectivity challenges, so the ICT staff is currently assisting her. I've also been informed that Goods representative or member Sean August will not be engaging in votes 3, 12, and 13, as well as vote 4 for today. So immediately next we move on to the Freedom Front Plus. Honorable Peter Maree, I recognize you.
Speaker, die Vryheidsfront Plus ondersteun die begroting in sy geheel. Ek spreek ook my dank uit teenoor die provinsiale tesourie vir hulle pypwerk en neem kennis van die mildelike ekstra 43 biljoen rand wat van ons toegewys is voorwaardelik deur die nasionale regering en tesourie. As die oppositie vandag die begroting in sy geheel verwerk en dit sou afgestem word, sal dit beteken dat geen onderwysers, geen verpleegsters, dokters en polisie volgende maand hulle salarisse sal ontvang nie. Let us not elevate the rejection of budgets to a principle. It should be constructive and creative. We need to break with tradition and enter a new era of constructive engagement and new ideas. Ek wonder of LPP's besef dat sou die begroting nie goedgekeur word nie, ons ook nie salarisse as LP's in hierdie huis sal ontvang volgende maand nie. Dit sal beteken hulle stem teen die conditional grant wat die nasionale regering aan ons ook gegee het. I hope that honorable members of our opposition could break with tradition and support the budget, leaving any reservations they may have for the individual vote that is to follow. Let's face it, the new South Africa is a failed project. Poverty eradication is a national fiscus responsibility. Provinces cannot eradicate poverty. That is a national fiscus responsibility. We need to establish the Western Cape as a pseudo second republic if we are to save ourselves and our descendants from being ridiculed by future historians for repeating the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Maree. Member Makamba Bocha, I take note that you are now connected. I will give now the opportunity to Honorable Brinkhuis, thereafter Member Makamba Bocha. Member Brinkhuis, you may proceed.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm not speaking on vote 3. Thank you, Speaker.
Thank you very much, Honorable Member. Then it is now Member Makamba Bocha. You may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, the core purpose of the Provincial Treasury Department should be to assist other provincial departments in the Cabinet to attain good financial governance. The department's core function is administrative in nature, with 65% of its budget going into the compensation of employees. Moreover, this department also has a duty to play an oversight role against other provincial government departments and to a certain extent municipalities. Madam Chair, however, under their watch and every year, almost each and every department will spend less of their allocated budget and therefore underperform when it comes to their service delivery duties. All this is done with the aim of allocating these funds to the Provincial Revenue Fund. So what is the purpose of allocating budget, knowing very well that the core aim is for it to end up in the Provincial Revenue Fund and not being used to execute service delivery in communities? Madam Chair, the province has a housing crisis, and instead of money being spent to alleviate the crisis, we will actually see budget cuts in the Provincial Department of Social Settlement in particular, with the rest of the money being channeled to the Provincial Revenue Fund. Moreover, we're also being told that the safety plan will be tackled with a whole societal approach in which every provincial department will be involved. However, it is hard to see contribution coming from this department in that respect. Moreover, it's not clear how effective is the role of the department in promoting good financial governance in municipalities if the City of Cape Town, together with other municipalities in the province, still experience irregular expenditure amounting to millions of rands. Madam Chair, the municipalities in the province also experience inadequate preventative controls on compliance, and it is not clear how the department aims to assist with that. For that reason, Madam Chair, the EFF will not be in support of this vote. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Makamba Bochia. I now recognize the Honourable Bosman.
Good morning, Honourable Speaker, colleagues, and the people of the Western Cape. As we meet today, South Africa is currently struggling under the pressure of an uncertain post-COVID world. The international order has been thrown into chaos due to a war in the Ukraine, and in turn, this has added to the uncertain environment we find ourselves in. The people of South Africa are in deep trouble as the fiscal constraints caused by years of mismanagement of our national economy is now making our lives a lot harder. There are vulnerable, desperate, and destitute people across this province whose only hope is the work of this government. And we are grateful for the budget to push forward, a budget that allows us to continue our fight against the COVID-19 pandemic corruption-free, a budget that allows us to help the Western Cape government focus on the strategic priorities as outlined by the Premier in his State of the Province address a few weeks ago, with a special focus on jobs, safety, and well-being. A budget that allows us to continue to make sure that the Western Cape has the best frontline services, including those in health, education, and social development. This budget to push forward allows us to spend more on infrastructure that actually grows the economy of the Western Cape. The vision of the Provincial Treasury is to be responsive and inclusive and to enable positive change in the lives of citizens. They do this by building capacity in the public sector, by being adaptive, innovative, and supportive, through integrative management and partnerships that enable the delivery of quality services in a sustainable manner across the province. They thus ensure the efficient and effective management of provincial resources as well as municipal resources, something that shines in a country where that does not happen. The Provincial Treasury provides policy direction, they facilitate and enforce the management of provincial financial systems and supply chain and movable asset management systems within the province as well as municipal spheres. This Treasury promotes accountability and financial governance within departments, entities, and municipalities. Honourable Speaker, as we know, the Western Cape government has been faced with unprecedented levels of fiscal uncertainty over the medium term, and the Provincial Treasury is able to provide an agile, responsive, and multi-phase budget process, coupled with efficient and compliant supply chain management support and financial governance support that provide guidance and oversight to respond to the current changing regulatory requirements and to focus on getting good audit outcomes. Honourable Speaker, in this budget vote, the Provincial Treasury has an allocation of just over 321 million for the 2022-2023 financial year. This funding allocation will go a long way in ensuring that they continue to play a pivotal role in ensuring cooperative governance across the province by providing support and training to municipalities. By prioritizing the upskilling and capacitation of local authorities, this department helps local municipalities to continue to provide effective service delivery. The ability of local governments to function effectively is an important priority for the Western Cape. We know it is not a priority for the ANC and the rest of the country. They have plundered local authorities and they sit here criticizing our successes and the programs and plans we have in place to support municipalities. The support to Western Cape municipalities in the form of subsidies and transfers are to the value of over 21 million. This is an increase of more than 29% from the revised estimate in the 2021-2022 financial year. Speaker, this is the Western Cape putting its money where its mouth is. This support to municipalities will go a long way in helping the most vulnerable municipalities in this province. And Speaker, it will come as no surprise to the House when I say that the three most dysfunctional, corrupt, and financially dire local authorities in the Western Cape is run by the African National Congress. This political party has mastered the art of looting, of breaking, and of making empty promises. The citizens of these municipalities must now rely on the Western Cape government to provide the most basic services. The support from the Provincial Treasury will ensure that this takes place, because we cannot rely on the ANC to get this right. Speaker, we read in the weekend papers that the ANC is as good as dead in the Western Cape. They're not able to even build 3 branches in this province. The aim of funding local government is to strengthen their capacity to deliver services, and a key part of this is to spend public finances in accordance with the legal framework outlined in the Municipal Finance Management Act. Thus, I'm happy that the Provincial Treasury has increased the MFMA coordination funding by more than 35%, because this is critical to ensuring that municipalities spend public funds appropriately, thus getting better audit outcomes. What we also see is a redesigned Western Cape Financial Management Support Grant and the Western Cape Management Capacity Building Grant. These grants have now been consolidated to avoid the duplication that comes with the structure of conditional grants. This makes the awarding of these grants much more effective. Over the medium-term expenditure framework, nearly 17 million has been allocated to 8 municipalities where the conditions for such interventions exist, such as Beaufort West. Almost 9 million has been allocated over the MTEF to the infrastructure sub-program to provide much needed support and capacity to municipalities to support infrastructure development at a local level. This is key to also aligning the work of municipalities to the infrastructure program of the Western Cape government, as outlined by the Premier during SOPA. Key to managing resources, Madam Speaker, and the assets is knowing how to manage those assets and resources effectively. Thus, it is encouraging to see that money has been set aside for project to review, improve, and formulate an asset management system of governance and capacity building training for local government. These commitments in the budget is testament to the commitment this government has made to creating a local government system that enables our citizens to thrive, ensuring that we create jobs, build safe communities, and create an environment of wellness in this province. Something we know the ANC wants to emulate, but they have not been able to get the basics right. It is my hope that the interventions planned in the ANC local authority of Beaufort West will be successful, because the only way to save this municipality is for our provincial treasury to use the tools at its disposal to get them back on track. The department continues to prioritize research, analysis, and planning. This includes giving us not just the Provincial Economic Review and Outlook, but the Municipal Economic Review and Outlook, as well as the socioeconomic profiles for local government. The department has completed research into the financial viability of district municipalities, and we are encouraged by the work being done to review the gambling policy of the Western Cape, which informs the development of a green paper on gambling policy. The department continues to guide and advise infrastructure procurement across the province. It monitors the infrastructure spending of designated departments, and it has supported the Western Cape Ministerial Infrastructure Coordinating Committee, thus helping to improve efficient and effective delivery. The 87.7 million for the project facility for preparation of infrastructure ensures that infrastructure is indeed shovel ready. The practice of building capacity also works inside the Provincial Treasury, where the Chartered Accountants Academy has been allocated 5 million to make sure that more graduates are able to enter the public service as well as the private sector. Thus, we are creating a pipeline of skilled and ethical finance practitioners. The demand for this academy is growing, and there are conversations with municipalities to ensure that this program can also be of benefit to them. Madam Speaker, in the Western Cape, competence and capability thrives, but we know that nationally corruption and maladministration is the order of the day. I was dumbfounded by the irrational decision by the National Minister of Finance through the National Treasury to suspend all procurement within government, effectively halting government spending. I'm glad that this panicked decision has now been revised into an advisory, but still, it leaves a lot to be desired when the Supreme Court of Appeal, before the Constitutional Court judgment, gave National Treasury a year to remedy the 2017 preferential procurement regulations. It is important for the state to have certain principles by which it procures, taking into consideration that the beneficiaries of this procurement are the people of South Africa. Public procurement sets out the rules by which the state is allowed to use the people's money to buy goods, works, and services. Our Constitution requires a public procurement system that is fair, equitable, transparent, competitive, and cost-effective, and that national legislation must prescribe this framework. In my view, the Constitutional Court creates an opportunity for provinces to draft their own preferential procurement policy. So I urge, through you, Madam Speaker, I urge Minister Mania to take up this opportunity to again become a leader in public procurement, just as he has put the Western Cape far ahead of all the other governments in our country through the publication of state procurement for all to see in the Public Procurement Disclosure Reports. Madam Speaker, we know that public procurement is at the heart of the work of government. 22% of the country's gross domestic product comes from public procurement. Therefore, it is important that we get it right. The recent revelations at the Zondo Commission, through its report, has brought to light the fragmented landscape of which public procurement exists in, and it shows how preferential procurement has been abused within the procurement cycle. Justice Zondo outlines that evidence shows that the ideals of empowerment were grossly manipulated and abused to advance the interests of a few individuals. And we can all guess from which political party those individuals come from. But once again, Madam Speaker, in the Western Cape, competence and capability thrives, whilst nationally we face a sea of corruption and maladministration. In this province, we produce procurement disclosure reports on COVID-19 expenses. And within our annual procurement disclosure report, you will find 7% of small and medium and micro enterprise suppliers have been supported. 60% of BBBEE suppliers have been supported. And 63% of suppliers within the Western Cape provinces have benefited from COVID-19 funding from provincial departments and entities. They have benefited. They were not robbed of. However, despite the Western Cape overachieving on the benchmarks and targets set by national government, we are currently limited by a fragmented legislative environment. In 2020, the much anticipated draft public procurement bill was published for public comment by the National Treasury, with the aim of consolidating the current fragmented legislative environment in South Africa. This bill will amend substantive provisions of the current BBBEE legislation. In its current form, the draft bill is very vague on various matters. These include the independence of the regulator, electronic procurement, rules for local government procurement when they are repealed, and it essentially repeals and then centralizes all of the power for regulating preferential procurement in the hands of the Minister of Finance nationally. The Western Cape Provincial Treasury's comments on the draft public procurement bill, a 255-page document, indicated in brief that in its current form, the province cannot support the draft bill. One comment on the submission sums up the concern that the Western Cape holds. The draft bill loses sight of the core imperative of obtaining value for money in public procurement. It does not provide for any systems or approach on which value for money can be transparently assessed relative to other procurement objectives. Now that the Afri-Business Constitutional Court case has been concluded, where it was confirmed the unconstitutionality of the 2017 preferential procurement regulations, the National Treasury has issued new draft regulations in this regard. And the Western Cape Budget Committee has requested that our provincial treasury submit inputs regarding these new regulations. The Constitutional Court has found that each organ of state is empowered to determine its own preferential procurement policy, and the national minister cannot make regulations that covers everyone. So we are now between a rock and a hard place, with vague draft regulations and vague draft bills, repealing or amending all of the procurement and almost all of the BBBEE legislation. It's being debated within an already fragmented public procurement legal regime, which favors corruption and nepotism over transparency and cost effectiveness. So amongst this turmoil, it is important to ensure price and functionality remain the most important factors within the legislative framework. After all, we are spending the people's money. And in spending it, we need to ensure that we deliver services at the lowest cost, closest to the people, because that's how we alleviate poverty and inequality. Whilst this will not be an easy task or an easy road to walk, it is up to each and every one of us to focus on achieving the values set out in our Constitution. Not just fairness or equity or transparency or competitiveness or cost effectiveness, but a balance of all five of them. With this in mind, I can say that as a province, we are immensely proud of the Provincial Treasury's Provincial Disclosure Reports, which discloses COVID-19 procurement on a monthly, quarterly, and annual basis. These reports are available for anyone to access the details of to look at the procurement transactions online on the Provincial Treasury dashboard. Please show me another province that has this. This innovation in particular speaks to the constitutional value of transparency. In a country marred with corruption scandals, it is of the utmost importance that residents are able to interrogate the transaction of the province, because this is not the government's money, nor the provincial treasury's money. This is the people's money. And we are well on our way to manage the people's money effectively. This budget is key to ensuring that this practice continues across government. But, Honourable Speaker, we must also make sure that the people of the Western Cape gets their rightful allocation. The state is funded by taxpayers, be it via VAT, income tax, or the dreaded fuel levy. It is the people's money. We are not getting an allowance from McBuffalo or the ANC. It is our money, and the people of the Western Cape are currently not receiving our equitable share. As resolved in the Budget Committee workshop, we need to see the calculations that make up the equitable share formula. Because believe it or not, nobody seems to be able to share this Excel spreadsheet that determines how we are able to fund services. It is better guarded than in Kandla. In order for the Western Cape government to continue leading the country in our world-class service delivery, such as health, we need to get our rightful allocation. Because as we know, Honourable Speaker, people move to places that provide them with opportunities and services. Migration into our province has increased significantly, thus putting pressure on our ability to continue to deliver services to the standards we have set ourselves. I therefore urge all members of this House to continue to ensure that our equitable share is achieved. Speaker, through you, I would like to advise my honourable friend, Member Nkondlo, that you should read the rest of Joseph Stichlin's work, where he actually argues that inequality leads to lower growth and less efficiency. He continues to argue that a free and competitive market is highly beneficial to society at large, but he cautions us in handing over control largely to the private sector. But as we know, and as Member Nkondlo knows through you, Speaker, in the Western Cape, we have not done that. This budget vote actually incorporates key programs that assist this government to alleviate poverty and inequality. It monitors spending on key service delivery projects in education, health and social development, and it includes clear programs for infrastructure-led growth. Speaker, it's easy to count how many times a word appears in a document, but we should actually look at where money has been allocated. To see where money has been allocated to alleviate poverty, honourable members should just read the budget documentation. Speaker, I wish to congratulate Minister Meinier, the head of department, Mr. Savage, and Team Finance for once again delivering a provincial treasury budget that is actually something that can be held as an example. They've done this under a severely fiscally constrained environment. I would also like to thank the Finance Committee, as well as our procedural officer, Ms. Adam, for their work in making sure that effective oversight happens. Speaker, I can proudly say that the DA supports this vote, and I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member Bosman. In conclusion to vote 3, I now recognise the Honourable Minister Meinier.
Thank you, House Chairperson. I would like to begin by thanking the Chairperson of the Standing Committee, Gillian Bosman, for his response to many of the issues raised, not least his deep dive into the work of Thomas Piketty and his consequences for economic growth. But there are some points that I would like to respond to, principally raised by opposition members. I'd like to start by thanking the Honourable Peter Murray again for his compliment, the paperwork done by Provincial Treasury. And I also look forward to and support his concept of constructive engagement and a debate about new ideas in the Provincial Parliament in the Western Cape. Honourable Makambo Bhatia, I think it is very important to understand that it is only because we held the line on our spending, particularly our spending on compensation of employees, that we have been able to balance our budget and are now able to allocate 10.1 billion rand more over the medium term in order to support delivery, particularly in education, health and social development in the Western Cape. Which brings me to the comments made by the Honourable Nomin Kondlo. On the infrastructure performance reports, I'd like to thank the Honourable Member for welcoming our initiative to furnish committees with infrastructure spending performance reports, which we will commence in the 2022-23 financial year. On the whole question of measuring the impact of spending, Provincial Treasury, of course, does measure the impact of spending through expenditure reviews, which are designed, obviously, to scrutinize the effectiveness of spending on programs. And in fact, these expenditure reviews have been piloted on the learner transport program, commuted overtime transfers to non-profit institutions, skills programs, and of course, broadband in the Western Cape. On the whole question of local content, we, of course, are concerned about the impact of localization on the prices of commodities, especially steel and cement in the Western Cape. And it's precisely for that reason that we've allocated 2 million rand to put systems in place to monitor any premiums that will be paid for commodities which have been designated for localization by national government in the Western Cape. But Honourable Chairperson, I think it's important to realize that our concerns and our reservations about localization are not confined to the Western Cape. Consider the comments made by Popo Molefe, chairperson of Transnet, who said, and I quote, "Part of our challenges arises out of local content requirements. Our understanding initially was that local content requirements would mean that we should procure products that are manufactured in South Africa. But in its application, local content requirements have now included compelling state-owned companies to procure through middle persons who buy goods outside the country and then put their own markup. And he says, before you acquire equipment, you have already lost a significant proportion of your budget." The final point that the Honourable Nomin Kondlo makes is the curious point of blaming the international community for inequality in South Africa. Now, in my reply to the budget debate, I dealt extensively with the World Bank report to which she refers. And I made the point that on the recommendations, for example, promoting equality of opportunity and the provision of early childhood development services, where we've allocated 3.2 billion rand over the medium term, on addressing the highly skewed distribution of productive assets and removing barriers to entrepreneurship and self-employment, where we've allocated 65 million rand over the medium term on making it easier to do business and supporting and enabling entrepreneurship, enhancing the impact of social spending, especially on education and health, where we'll be spending roughly 83.8 billion rand and 84 billion rand over the medium term, and of course strengthening resilience, especially in relation to climate change, where we will be spending about 36 million rand over the medium term on the municipal energy resilience, a project to enable our municipalities to procure and to sell and generate electricity from independent power producers so that they can withstand shocks. So the provincial government are making progress when it comes to the kind of solutions proposed in the report to which she refers here in the Western Cape. However, it's not the international community, I'm sure honourable members would agree, that is causing inequality, but national government's disastrous management of this economy, which has resulted in stagnant economic growth and stratospheric levels of unemployment, leaving households with no income, which is precisely what is driving up inequality in South Africa. Of course, Honourable Chairperson, to the extent that the international community may be driving up inequality, then surely Exhibit A must be the Honourable Member's best friend, Vladimir Putin and the Russian Federation, whose war on aggression in the Ukraine is driving up petrol prices, driving up energy prices, and driving up food prices, putting pressure on households and making the poor poorer, and therefore driving up inequality in South Africa. I thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Honourable Mania. Honourable Member Sayed, just a kind reminder that no interjections are allowed. I'm sure if not today, over the next few days, you will have your opportunity as well. Honourable members, this concludes the debate on vote 3 of the Provincial Treasury. I will now ask the Secretary to read the second order of the day.
Debate on vote 12, Economic Development and Tourism, Western Cape Appropriation Bill.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. I now recognise the Honourable Minister, Minister Mania.
Thank you, House Chairperson. I'm a double act this morning. Honourable House Chairperson, today we table the main budget for the Department of Economic Development and Tourism in the amount of 514.7 million rand for the 2022 financial year to deliver on 5 strategic objectives: accelerating the ease of doing business, boosting private sector investment and promoting exports, enterprise development, scaling up work opportunities, and ensuring economic resilience. To push forward, we will spend 23.5 million rand in the 2022-23 financial year on accelerating the ease of doing business so that we make it easier to start a business or to expand a business in the Western Cape. Last week, House Chairperson and I had the pleasure of visiting Shown-Equip Social Enterprise, a local business which manufactures and supplies equipment to help disabled children and adults become mobile so that they can be part of their communities. Through the Ease of Doing Business hotline, the Executive Director of Shown-Equip approached us for help with an outstanding overdue payment owed to her business for goods delivered. Following our intervention, Shown-Equip received the outstanding payment and was able to pay the salaries of 84 staff members and stay open for business. Shown-Equip is just one example of hundreds of businesses that our Ease of Doing Business unit has helped to overcome inefficient government bureaucracy that is restricting economic growth. This financial year alone, the Ease of Doing Business unit have dealt with over 600 cases and have maintained an overall resolution rate of about 88%. And to build on the good work already done last week, we launched the Western Cape Government's 10 million rand Municipal Ease of Doing Business Fund, which will provide capacity and funding support to municipalities to make it easier for businesses, especially for small businesses in both the formal and the informal sectors, to do business in the Western Cape. One of our major focus areas when it comes to ease of doing business, of course, is the Port of Cape Town. We know that removing obstacles to exports is a critical lever in our strategy to grow the economy and to create jobs in the Western Cape. We know that to become the most competitive region in Africa, we need the most competitive port in Africa. While the Western Cape government does not have a formal mandate or jurisdiction over the Port of Cape Town, we could not sit back and do nothing. That is why we have created a port task team, including key stakeholders and decision makers across the port logistics chain to address the numerous challenges at the port. A big part of the issues at ports across South Africa is massive capital under expenditure, which of course translates into a shortage of equipment, poor maintenance of equipment, which in turn has severe consequences for the port's ability to manage inevitable breakdowns. Over the last 3 years, House Chairperson, Transnet Port Terminal's capital under expenditure amounted to 2.3 billion rand, or almost 30% of its capital budget. The situation is even worse when it comes to Transnet Port Authority, with capital under expenditure amounting to about 4.2 billion over the last 3 years, or 57% of its capital budget, which is why it is now time to privatize port operations in the Port of Cape Town. Because at the end of the day, when the port works, our economy works in the Western Cape. I will, honourable members will be interested to hear, we'll be meeting Portia Derby, the Group Chief Executive Officer of Transnet, later this week to discuss what is going to be done about the Port of Cape Town, which is frankly a disaster zone, evidenced by screaming headlines in this weekend's report, which read, "Tonne vrugte vrot weens hawe chaos," and the risks, of course, of the port compromising economic recovery in the Western Cape. As Chairperson, to push forward, we will also spend 127.6 million rand in the 2022-23 financial year on boosting investment, trade and tourism promotion so that we attract investment, expand trade and scale up tourism. Growing exports primarily through trade promotion and the removal of obstacles to exports is a critical lever in our strategy to grow the economy and create jobs in the Western Cape. On Wednesday, the 16th of March 2022, we celebrated the one-year anniversary of the US Western Cape Trade and Investment Promotion Partnership. The United States is a key tourism and business market for the Western Cape. The US was the Western Cape's largest export market for the first time in 2021. The United States was also the largest investor in the Western Cape. And through our regular engagements, we have seen the impact of this partnership in securing investments in the health sector, the tech sector, and the increase in agricultural exports to the United States, as well as the significant growth in tourism from the United States to the Western Cape. As Chairperson, to push forward, we will also spend 41.9 million rand in the Saldanha Bay Industrial Development Zone. And to push forward, we will spend 39.1 million rand on the Atlantis Economic Zone. We are very pleased that after significant work by the Atlantis Special Economic Zone team and the Western Cape government, the National Minister of Finance gazetted the Atlantis Special Economic Zone as a 3D public enterprise in December last year, which at the end of the day is good news, we think, for the Western Cape. As Chairperson, to push forward, we will also spend 23.5 million rand on enterprise development to support businesses, especially small businesses in the formal and informal economy in the Western Cape. We will facilitate the provision of financial and indeed non-financial support for small businesses, create and increase demand for small business products and services, and support small businesses in retail, particularly in townships in the Western Cape. We have allocated 17 million rand to the SMME Booster Fund to support interventions implemented by organizations and municipalities that are geared towards supporting small businesses in the formal and in the informal economy in the Western Cape. Deputy House Chairperson, to push forward, we will spend 96.2 million rand in the 2022-23 financial year for the coordination, facilitation, and implementation of skills development initiatives. To push forward, we will spend 32.9 million rand for skills development in the business processing and outsourcing sectors. This will enable candidates to participate in a 12-month training and internship program to obtain the necessary skills to be placed permanently in a job market here in the Western Cape. We will invest in the development of competitive skills, particularly among young people, as a response to the persistently high levels of unemployment, which has been exacerbated by the pandemic. Our Work and Skills program incentivizes companies to offer experiential work opportunities to unemployed youth. This work placement program allows youth to gain experience firsthand, develop technological skills, and gain softer skills such as teamwork and interpersonal skills that will make them more rounded and attractive candidates for any employer in the Western Cape. House Chairperson, to push forward, we will spend 12 million rand in the 2022-23 financial year to diversify our regional energy mix and improve energy resilience in the Western Cape. Our municipal energy resilience project is a bold and ambitious project to support municipalities to generate and to procure and to sell their own power so that we can beat load shedding in the Western Cape. Pre-feasibility studies have been undertaken on 5 pioneering projects, of which 4 are embedded in municipal networks, and the 5th is a municipal pooled buying mechanism for larger projects. This work has involved detailed technical, legal, and financial analysis. The focus is now on working with municipalities in a phased manner to further develop the pioneering projects, including the provision of transaction advisory and other advisory support to ensure that the projects are financially, technically, and of course, legally sound before embarking on any procurement processes. The Western Cape Government is currently providing grant funding to 13 projects across 18 municipalities to undertake foundational energy studies. These include electricity master plans and cost of supply studies that are aimed at providing a technical and financial basis for increased penetration of renewable energy on municipal networks. This will help, of course, to unlock both private and public sector energy generation, procurement, and trading. We are also providing in-depth wheeling support to 7 municipalities, which are aimed at enabling private sector players to sell, buy, and trade electricity across municipal grids. We recognize that enabling the implementation of renewable energy at scale will, of course, require major grid strengthening and expansion. And so we are working with both municipalities and national stakeholders to identify needs and to develop different ways of how infrastructure may be delivered and financed. In conclusion, House Chairperson, I would like to take this opportunity to announce that Mr. Velile Dube will join us as the new head of department of the Department of Economic Development and Tourism. He brings a wealth of experience and expertise from his long career in the private sector and state-owned enterprises, and he will join us and commence work as head of department on the 1st of May 2022. As Chairperson, we will, of course, soon be saying goodbye to our outgoing head of department, Mr. Sali Fourie. And I would like to take this opportunity also to pay tribute and to thank him for leading the department for more than a decade and contributing immeasurably to driving economic growth and job creation in the Western Cape. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister Mania. I now recognize Honourable Member Nkondlo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Let me also just follow suit from where the Minister has ended to bid farewell to HOD Soli, who has been with the department for some time, and welcome Mr. Dube as announced to join and take over the reins from the 1st of May. And all the best to him in this department. Let us join once again as the ANC. We would like to register that we do not support this budget vote. And also within our right, a party in this provincial government, within the constructive realm raised by other members from their standing of their own parties and position, that the ANC is no different in raising its own opinion based on its views on this particular vote. As our country and province emerges from 3 years of suffering under the global pandemic, the ANC in this House remains unconvinced that this budget vote places the correct emphasis on where it should be. From the beginning of this 6th Parliament, the ANC side of the House has sought to ensure that small businesses, and in particular those in the informal economy, remains its priority as far as the economic development and tourism of this province is concerned. We believe that it is in these communities where the informal economy exists that inequality, unemployment, and poverty must be tackled. Instead, what we have seen from the ruling party in the province is experiment after experiment when it comes to this vital sector. The emphasis and priority in this department is placed on foreign investment instead of supporting domestic investment and cultivating domestic supply. I would like to further invite the MEC and I think our new chair of this committee for further discussion, and I'm hoping also in the House, so that we've got clarity about the understanding of political economy in general, but also in as far as understanding international relations, so that we can be able to understand the varied interrelationship and interconnection between international or global economy and domestic economies, because it will be very much worrying that at that highest level, such nuance is really not understood. It places emphasis and priority on Delta airline flights and is quick to declare an intergovernmental dispute instead of attending to the legitimate concerns of taxi operators in this province. The department places emphasis on big business and supports projects funding big companies like Big and Pay more than ensuring the sustainability of enterprises in our townships. And we are on record as the ANC having called for a balance between the investment and the efforts of this provincial government in as far as ensuring big business and international investment versus those that are emerging and the small businesses. That is all that we are calling for as the ANC. Yet again, we have a case of lofty announcements and plans by this provincial government instead of implementing what they had planned. For example, the Western Cape Strategic Plan, once again, of 2019-2024 says, and I quote, "We will also reflect on our own internal processes that could be hindering growth and investment, and will similarly work with the metro and municipalities to cut down on unnecessary administrative burdens for business." An important area in this regard is examining where existing bylaws and bureaucratic systems could be hampering SMMEs, particularly in the informal economy, end quote. This is in the Western Cape, I repeat, Western Cape Strategic Plan 2019-2024. While the ANC welcomes the repurposing of the red tape unit to the ease of business unit, let's also note that in his maiden speech already in 2019, the Premier of this province, Premier, he said, open quote, "We will also help to establish red tape reduction units in all of our municipalities and provide them with the support they needed to succeed." This was close quote. This was said 3 years ago, and now later the unit is being repurposed and red tape and rigid, let alone inhumane regulatory environment persist in municipalities against many in the informal economy to pursue their livelihoods. We call for changing of mindset in the entire provincial government, especially in respect to small businesses and the informal economy, and such must start in this Department of Economic Development. A member of the public asked the chairperson of the standing committee during our debate, during our committee, on how he or she could open a call center, and the response was a long-winded analysis of the sector instead of telling the person what practical steps to take in cognizance in order to make the goal a reality. Eventually, the MEC had to intervene and ask the person's details. Another example is that a question was asked in the standing committee about the support given to municipalities in order for them to encourage small businesses. This question was also asked in the standing committee of local governance. The answer received continuously referred to compliance by small businesses. And so the very units charged with cutting red tape has a compliance mentality instead of invigorating and encouraging one that brings some kind of innovation to enable businesses to triumph, especially small businesses in the municipalities. The unit must strive to assist in establishing the small businesses at all costs and not strive to ensure that the small business is only compliant. These are two very different goals, and the department is simply not getting it right. The other response was on the digitization that was achieved by some municipalities and the support to small businesses. Yet one wonders if this was responsive to the needs of small businesses or whether the department think this is important. In this respect, the ANC is worried about the time and resources spent on by the department in partnering with big companies such as Pick n Pay in their individual or independent market stores, as they name them. What was the theory of change behind this project? How did this project manage to secure 5,000 rands per store owner from public funds towards this venture, which is actually 4 million of the 8 store owners that were supported by this provincial department? How was this project considered? If you think of the CSI and ED element of BBBE scorecard of Pick n Pay, that could have been sufficient as capital injection for this particular project. How was the Competition Commission market study revelations about the uncompetitive behavior of the big retail giants, including Pick n Pay, factored in to consider how this model will move away from such behaviors? But also, how did this model not place a township as the battleground of these retail corporates for the township markets as they change their ventures between Boxer, USAID, etc., and collapsing local enterprising capacity? The department informed us that it has exited, that is 5 years later, the program to consider other interventions. And this is said against our caution repeatedly about the bouquet approach to a response to the township and informal economy in the province. As did at exit this Pick n Pay market stores project, we must note that Gauteng province, where it started, it also exited the program. The NEF also, CIFA also was no longer funding this particular model. And also they mentioned challenges of the operational model of this venture that is not reflective to its responsiveness to local supply and demand needs. We shall be following the effects of this venture that have left some of these enterprises with huge debts. After following this initiative and its promise to revitalize the township economy as it was lauded by the Premier as when he was an emissary of economic development then, we had discovered some serious concerns as already 2 stores from the reported aid by this department have terminated their contract of operations under this model. One was in Gugulethu and other in Delft. And the one in Delft actually just opened in 2019. Both stores are left with debt from loans around 3 million and above. And of concern is that one of the stores, as said, was operational for only 11 months and the project failed. And the other for only 3 years, 4 months. This is of concern to what is behind this failure. In our initial inquiries, the blame was placed on the door of the store owner from the information and the response from the department. This is against what we're told as a rigorous recruitment and selection process that we're informed of, that all applicants of this project go through, including the involvement of communities to finally decide on the successful candidate. In addition, the program, we were told, provides constant mentorship and training to enable any warning on challenges for the business. We're also told that some of the stores that are still in operation also experience tremendous strain, particularly on internal matters and relational issues with the model. This includes issues of flexibility that allow store owners to respond swiftly on market needs from the township environments they operate in, which some are not always part of the traditional operations of the formal retail giant and brand like Pick n Pay. Since this model was said to be different to a franchise and called independent store owners, some level of flexibility and independence of decision-making by the store owners was expected, but the experience of the store owners leaves much to be desired, as some feel this model is as stringent as a franchise structure. Again, the absence of a dedicated strategy to township economy small rural towns and informal sector remains a glaring policy failure of this provincial department. In the last budget, 27.1 million was allocated to the DDET Enterprise Unit to run individualized projects such as this Pick and Pay Market Store project, the SMME Booster Fund 2021, Western Cape Entrepreneurship Recognition Awards. These projects can only be useful and impact-driven if embedded in a clear strategy to serve those markets with peculiar geographies that fall outside mainstream economy. But it is our communities, our people, and our economies that are experimented with such patronizing imagination. As if our people cannot run their own businesses, this department believes lacks innovation or interest to use bottom-up innovation from these townships, and rather decides to fund such a cooperation in trying to teach local and township enterprises how to do business. Speaker, the ANC is often criticized for not providing alternatives by a governing party which does not listen to it. So again, we hope that the DA members are listening when we point them to the ANC Gauteng run province, which last week announced the Township Economy Bill. This bill seeks to promote inclusive human settlements by bringing people closer to economic opportunities. Develop a real commuter economy that uses taxi ranks and convert them into minibuses and commercial districts. Integrates unused land, abandoned buildings, and forgotten industrial estates into township value chains and turbocharge the economic growth of the Gauteng city region, and creates a new economic geography through the township zones. MEC for Economic Development in Gauteng, Parkstau, says, what is equally important to note is that this Township Economic Development Bill enables the Township Economy Partnership Fund to become legally binding for all future Gauteng governments. He continues to outline that this policy certainty and legal continuity to support SMMEs, which are the lifeblood of the economy. The Partnership Fund is an instrument to support SMMEs through blending government money with private sector money, working with smart platforms or intermediaries to run portfolios of loans to SMMEs operating in the township economy. The ANC in this house will soon commence the process of sponsoring a private members bill on the township rural towns economy. And this is a all-rounded and more of a comprehensive response to township, small rural towns economy than individualized and bouquet interventions that are said to be supporting the township economy. Speaker, this provincial government's own payroll, a document they seem to consistently ignore, highlights, and I quote, the informal sector plays an important role in absorbing the relative lower skilled workforce into employment and making the labor market more flexible towards employers and entrepreneurs. In the Western Cape, the African and colored population provide a relatively larger contribution to informal employment than to total employment, close quote. The payroll goes on to note that between the second quarter of 2020 and the first quarter of 2021, the informal sector in the Western Cape gained back 53.2% of jobs lost compared. In comparison, the formal sector recovered by 34.5%, close quote. It is, however, important, Speaker, to hasten to add that the ANC, a champion for the informal sector, does recognize the vulnerability and exposure experienced by those who are operating in the informal sector. We will never encourage casualization, but we do recognize the lack of access to healthcare benefits, pension funds, protection from exploitation and instability experienced by owners or workers in the informal sector. While on the one hand, we encourage the informal sector, we dare not encourage the proliferation of labor brokers and casualization. Our workers must be protected. It was therefore refreshing to hear the Honorable Batman applauding the ANC-initiated labor laws in our country on Friday and encouraging us to encourage our national comrades to ensure more security for workers, which is something that we will always do and we have forever done with the ANC. Another proposal the ANC wishes to make is that we should have more funding.
Can you please finish your sentence?
Thank you, Speaker. In conclusion, we know full well that the DA is not interested in respecting the constitutional competencies of the national and local government spheres when it comes to ports. For this reason, Speaker, the ANC cannot support this vote. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member Kontlo. I now recognize the Honourable Member Makamba Bocha.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The economic freedom fighters in the Western Cape is shocked at the budget allocation of 517.7 million in the Department of Economic Development and Tourism in this province. This budget, Madam Speaker, allocation does not inspire confidence when one measures it against what must be achieved and in the province so far as economic recovery plan and employment opportunities are concerned. The provincial economy is not at the level where millions of skilled employees are working meaningful jobs and earning decent salaries. What we see daily is young skilled workers who are forced to take any job coming their way with the aim of making ends meet and providing for their families with the little that they receive. Madam Speaker, every year this department boasts about the province having the least number of unemployed people when compared to other provinces, which is a lie, basically. But the majority of these so-called employed people are actually people doing internships and some low-paying jobs for call center agencies. These are not the type of jobs that can change people's lives. The provincial economy is still battling to absorb qualified graduates in the province. This provincial government, Madam Speaker, is failing dismally to absorb qualified nursing staff in clinics and hospitals, even though these health institutions are experiencing staff shortages which affect service delivery in the province. This is so because the government is guided by some irrational economic policy that is not the duty of government to provide employment, but that of the private sector. Madam Speaker, our people have still not recovered from the effects of hard lockdown as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, which resulted in them losing their jobs and sources of generating income because most companies could not survive and they closed down. This department should play a strategic role, Madam Speaker, in assisting individuals to create their own businesses, and the budget allocation for the department should be increased so that people can be assisted with funding. We're all aware what the department has embarked on, this issue of the township economy initiative by the department through pick and pay model. That was just another smart strategy to destroy the black economy. It was just a window shopping exercise that served as a tick box that the Western Cape Provincial is driving township economic development, which turned out to be an opposite, as these pick and pay shops in the townships are in deep debt and owing millions of rands to pick and pay. So we are shocked by what the department is doing. The department, Chairperson, must not only preach economic development, but put into effect. The department must make sure that the emerging black farmers are allocated land and resources in order to farm and be empowered. The income gap and inequality between white people must also be addressed. I thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Honourable Member. I now recognize Honourable Peter Maree.
Deputy Speaker, I support Vote 12, but Minister, I wish to appeal to you. Help us to preserve the Cape culture through making Cape culture increasingly part of your marketing the Western Cape. Make a project of visits to places where the culture of the Khoi, the Griqua, and other indigenous peoples are displayed. The Western Cape could be mistaken for a derelict Zimbabwean town with spaza shops and shacks on every open space, beggars at every traffic light. Who has utilized most opportunities in the informal settlement areas? Certainly not original Western Cape people. Ask yourself, Minister, who utilized most opportunities? Who are working in our supermarkets? Who are trading on Green Market Square? You don't find any of our people there. No, it's Zimbabweans, Nigerians, they are on Green Market Square. They took over the Grand Parade. Only thing they haven't taken over is the the flower sellers here in Adderley Street. We are creating jobs for people from Africa's failed states. But be careful, we're on the road to a failed state. And where are we going to run to? We can't run to Zimbabwe. Can't run to the Congo. We got nowhere to go. And we can't even run to Table Mountain. The sea blocks us.
Thank you, Honorable Mare. Please
Can I
wrap up. Just finish your sentence, please.
I ask you, Cape Town is becoming a disaster, Minister. Look at after our small fishermen at the Hout Bay. Look at flower sellers, the garment industries. Make walker stalls in the townships another feature in cooperation with the municipality.
Thank
And
you
look
very
at the
much,
grain
Honorable
trade.
Mare. Your
I
time
thank
is
you.
up. Thank you. I now recognize the Honorable Bosman. Or rather, my apologies, Honorable Brunkhuis.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm not speaking on this vote also.
Thank you
Speaker.
very much, Honorable Member. Honorable Bosman.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Honourable Speaker, the Western Cape economy has suffered from floods, fire, inefficient ports, crippling load shedding, a national economic recession, a global health pandemic, and now a locust outbreak. As a young person, I tremble at the age we are living in. It's almost as if we have been cast as extras on a biblical movie set, but the director hasn't given anyone the script for the next scene. We wait. In fact, who could ever forget the infamous flip-flop prohibition during the hard lockdown, where the Minister of Trade and Industry banned us from buying open-toe shoes? Despite our provincial economy having grown by 4.3% in 2021, recovering 46,000 jobs in the third quarter of 2021, having created the most jobs in South Africa year on year, and yes, through you, Honourable Speaker, to Member Makamba Bocha, that is a fact borne out in statistics. The Western Cape has the lowest youth and expanded unemployment rates in this country. Our province has certainly not been exempt from the national economy destroying lockdown regulations these past 2 years. In order to recover and bounce back, the Department of Economic Development and Tourism, our Jobs Department, has focused on the ease of doing business, boosting investments and exports, developing enterprises, and scaling up work opportunities and skills initiatives, as well as securing the energy resilience of this province. 3 of the biggest export users of the Cape Town terminal were assisted during this time to integrate their container dispatch data and map their logistics supply chains. This has prevented bottlenecks and the loss of and value of cargo. And as the Minister just reminded us, we've got fruit literally rotting in the port. In a province with the biggest agricultural sector and that contribute the most to exports, particularly in relation to fresh fruit and vegetables, these are items that need to get from farm to table as quickly as possible. It is critical that we continue working together to decrease the turnaround time at the Port of Cape Town. The work of the department has decreased import duties on manufacturing imports, officially secured market access in China for the export of pears, and they have unlocked the exports in the aquaculture sector. This has been done through truck booking systems, real-time communication, and the weekly coordination meetings that take place within the department. It is thus important to note and to welcome the appointment of the former Transnet COO and the CEO of the Transnet Port Terminals as the new head of department. And we welcome Mr. Velile Dube, and we hope that this will signify an increased focus on the breakdown of trade barriers and increase our exports and investments in the province. Welcome to the Western Cape, sir. Welcome to the province that gets things done. In the Western Cape, we believe in efficiency and even simply targeted methods that can assist with the elimination of obstacles, specifically in government. Very much like David in front of Goliath. The department assisted 4 municipalities to automate 7 business-facing services that affect the construction industry, including improvements in land use application, a property development tool, and heritage resources inventory and a heritage digital tool, thus speeding up development in local communities. In tourism, exports and investments, we've further seen that Westra has facilitated almost 5.8 billion rands committed investments and 4,203 jobs that have come into this province. The trade promotion program facilitated 49 signed trade agreements with an estimated value of 958 million, estimating in almost 236 jobs up until Q3 in the current financial year. 3 outward foreign direct investment declarations have also been signed. Speaker, Rome wasn't built in a day, but in the Western Cape, we lay the bricks for progress every hour of every day, every single day of the year. And in building this foundation towards recovery of our provincial economy, the department updated its draft 10-year tourism strategy, the Tourism Blueprint 2030, as this outlines the Destination Western Cape's vision to assist the industry in recovering the 2019 base figures during 2024. In December of 2021, recovery in domestic arrivals at the Cape Town International Airport was at 66% of 2019 figures, slightly below the 70% target. The November 2021 recovery in international arrivals at Cape Town International Airport was the highest for the season at 38% of 2019 figures. In December, this dropped to 27%, but recovered to 35% on the 2019 figures. The Get That Far Away Feeling campaign reached almost 1 million views on the Bali TikTok video. And our never-ending tourist campaign to attract UK, German, and Dutch tourists have reached 1 million views before the end of November and was chosen as part of Facebook's Best in Class globally. In fact, the Department of Economic Development and Tourism won a bronze award from the national government for its economic response to COVID-19. One of the ways in which the department has done this is through support provided to 15 tourism products across the Western Cape through the Tourism Product Development Fund, which leveraged 13 million rands worth of investment and 300 jobs in the sector in this industry. In order to restore access, movement, and confidence, we have fought for removing travel restrictions, improving airlift, and reopening our cruise markets because the Omnicon travel ban saw the cruise ship cancellations coming to this province. We have developed and implemented an integrated season readiness plan in consultation with metros and with the district, and this has saw 300 tourism monitors deployed and 10 tourism law enforcement officers deployed in the city of Cape Town. We fought for the unblocking of delays in the UIF TERS payouts, and we have lobbied for a second round of tourism relief aid from national government. We've also secured 18 million rand for the Western Cape through the National Tourism Infrastructure Maintenance Program, which will invest in the tourism infrastructure maintenance at the Cederberg Nature Reserve, the Whoop Nature Reserve, Kuchelberg Nature Reserve, Gaukama Nature Reserve, Wolvekloof Nature Reserve, and Lookout Hill in Khayelitsha. We've launched the Western Cape Business Events Support Project, and Westra has funded 47 regional events in support of the events industry. The department implemented a domestic campaign for remote working to build confidence in the Western Cape as the destination of choice to do business in remotely. It is thus critical that we introduce a remote visa for international travelers. International best practice shows that this kind of visa encourages long-term stays, it supports local economies, and critically for South Africa, it can give the tourism and hospitality sector a much-needed boost for the recovery of jobs. The greater good of our tourism and hospitality industry needs innovative solutions that will lead to true recovery and sustained growth in the future. Throughout the pandemic, remote working has become the norm across the globe, and as more international travelers combine their love for travel and their work, South Africans should be throwing their doors open to welcome them. We need to see quick responses from national government when it comes to administrative changes that could see real support for an industry which has lost 1 million jobs since 2018 and has suffered a decline of 70% from international travels since the start of the pandemic. We need to protect and claw back our market share as an accessible, affordable international tourist destination. We should be keeping pace with other countries who have taken advantage of remote work visa solutions and put themselves on the map. Countries like Estonia, which has become a hub for digital nomads the world over. As the mandate for immigration lies squarely at the feet of national government, we urge, and I repeat, we strongly urge the national ministers of tourism and home affairs to urgently respond to the proposal from the Western Cape government. It is time for decisive and quick responses from the union buildings to support the tourism industry, not only in the Western Cape, but across the country. The national government thinks it can do whatever it wants without consequences, and that provinces will follow its instructions with unwavering faith and the bravery of Rachel, who patiently waited to marry Jacob after being cruelly deceived. In the Western Cape, we govern with open eyes, and we will not be conned into believing words that are accompanied by actions. As always, the Saldanha IDZ continues to perform as one of the best IDZs in our country. Having concluded new leases, completed additional investor facilities, increased the occupancy of the Access Complex, which is now up to 45%, and continuing to achieve major progress with the feasibility of pre-financing work of the marine infrastructure expansion that includes being profiled as a sustainable infrastructure development, infrastructure development symposium of South Africa priority project. The SPIDZ's CoLab facility has received more than 1,500 SMME visits, and the High Schools Development Initiative has trained 18 local teachers in digital teaching software and skills for grade 8 and 9 mathematics. The project leasing facility aims to create more than 1,000 jobs for 2021-2022. Speaker, the Atlantis Special Economic Zone Company finally attained listing as a provincial government enterprise in the past financial year, after the request was gathering dust on the desk of the Minister of Finance nationally, delaying investment and infrastructure growth in our province. This is a major milestone for the project, as it can now unlock investment into the Atlantis Special Economic Zone. This infrastructure build program was not allowed to commence until it was listed as a Schedule 3D entity. But the work to build Rome does not stop. The Western Cape government continued to focus on concluding infrastructure-related work in the last financial year. This included the commencement of an investigation into the reactivation of the rail link between the Atlantis industrial area and the Port of Cape Town, a project that is likely to enable the transportation of goods for industrialists beyond the Atlantis boundaries. Investment in the existing ASEZ businesses over the past financial year amounted to 142 million rands, with 50 new jobs being created. The Atlantis Special Economic Zone will now activate its build program for at least 2 investors in the 2022-2023 financial year to the value of 150 million, and it is anticipated that 225 direct jobs will be created in just the construction phase. Technical training in areas such as renewable energy, workshop operation, basic welding, and component assembly for individuals, as well as support to science and mathematics education at high school level, will reach more than 120 individuals. In support of enterprise development as part of the Western Cape Recovery Plan, the SMME Booster Fund supported SMMEs in the Western Cape, growing and enhancing their sustainability with particular focus on rural, urban, and township-based youth, people with disabilities, and women-owned small and medium and micro enterprises. 10 organizations and municipalities were assisted to support 358 businesses, and the aim was to create between 300 and 400 jobs. The project has been successfully implemented to date. Further, the Western Cape Entrepreneurship Recognition Awards recognize and support the province's most deserving and inspiring high potential entrepreneurs. The 12 winners received both financial and non-financial support valued at approximately 1 million rand, and thus enhancing the capacity of these businesses. The Long Street kiosks enabled 10 small and micro enterprises to access new market opportunities in the central business district of the city of Cape Town. And we also supported the construction industry with the contractor information sessions in conjunction with agencies and organizations such as SARS, local municipality, and the Construction Industry Development Board. Workshops were held in Parow, Gouda, Villiersdorp, and George. In terms of skill development, this department has done one of the most cost-effective employment creation programs, securing sustainable youth employment at an average of 30,000 a job. The skills development program secured more than 100 million in leverage funding from the private sector and other funding sources. More than 4,100 beneficiaries benefited or are benefiting from these experiential learning programs that provide a combination of structured, accredited, or vendor skills programs, experiential learning of up to 12 months, and a departmental stipend of up to 3,000 rand per month that was being topped up by a further 3,000 by the private sector. The skills development program resulted in further employment subsequent to the department experiential learning programs of up to 80%. Because these departmental funds are used nearly exclusively for stipends, the programs support household income during the devastating impact of the pandemic on household incomes. Unlike the unsustainable presidential youth employment initiative that simply gives us once-off money allocation, this program helps to ensure that youth have options available to them upon the completion of their internships. The department has also assisted entrepreneurs scaling up spaza stores, and we were fortunate enough to visit some of the Pick n Pay supported spaza stores in Langa. The Nozingas market received a 250,000 rand grant from DDAT, and almost 3 million was leveraged from the private sector. The Nwamba market received 362 million from DDAT and almost 5 million leveraged from the private sector. Something Nice received 171,000 from this department and almost 3.1 million leveraged from the private sector. We also saw the Mbukweni market receiving 650,000 from this department, with more than 4 million leverage from the private sector. Tembi's market, Nwabe's market, the Luzukile market, as well as Wabo's market, also all received almost more than 2 million from DDAT, with much more being generated from the private sector. This shows, Madam Speaker, that we don't only just support small enterprises in growing the informal economy, but we also make sure that we're able to leverage access to private sector funding as well. On the energy front, like Moses parting the Red Sea, the Western Cape government has clarity of vision with its Municipal Energy Resilience Initiative, which aims to make the Western Cape province the first load-shedding free province in South Africa. This program facilitates, supporting and positions municipalities for the implementation of energy infrastructure development for economic growth and energy affordability. And it aims to contribute towards the target of 500 megawatts of new generation capacity by 2025. Already, a detailed roadmap for 5 pioneering projects in the candidate municipalities has been produced during phase 1 of this initiative. During phase 2, we established the fund to undertake the foundational work towards the municipal renewable energy project implementation. This meant the establishment of a panel of service providers to assist the procurement of transaction advisory and other services that may be required for pioneering and other project implementation. The department also continued to drive the uptake of rooftop solar PV in the province, providing 20 municipalities with support and service around small-scale embedded generation, wheeling and/or utility-scale energy matters. So far, 24 municipalities in the province allow private rooftop PV connections to the grid, with 19 of these municipalities allowing households and businesses to be compensated for feeding this back into their networks. These efforts have resulted in the installation of approximately 49 megawatts of registered rooftop PV in the Western Cape in the first 2 quarters of the 2021 financial year, representing 490 million rands worth of investment and around 120 jobs. Direct support was provided to 462 businesses and organizations on water and energy matters, with more than 9,805 downloads of the 4 2021 market intelligence reports covering energy services, utility scale renewable, water, and electric vehicles. These MIRs allow for the positioning of market players in the growing energy and water sector. So, Speaker, we know that this government is able to deliver because it has a department that creates economic opportunities. And through you, Madam Speaker, I'd like to invite the Honourable Murray to join the next cluster visit, where we will again visit programs that support the development of tourism projects that showcases Cape culture. The Standing Committee visited the Ikwatu project on the West Coast, where it was shown how through support from this department, tourism innovation took place to share the culture of the Khoi and the San people by also showing how jobs can be created in a sustainable manner. Not only do we support municipalities to support local economic development growth, but the province actually gets involved in directly funding some of these catalytic projects to enable our township economies to grow, not just in Khayelitsha, in Langa, but also in townships across the province. Because we know we do not just need one bill to cover township economic growth, because in the Western Cape, our townships are part of the Western Cape and not separate entities that require separate legislation. Speaker, once again, we are grateful to the Minister and his team for their hard work that creates jobs to grow the economy of the Western Cape. Speaker, I want to thank the Minister, and more importantly, also thank the retiring head of department, Mr. Solly Fourie, for his hard work and commitment to the department. We wish him well in his retirement, and we welcome the new HOD, and we look forward to working with him and continue the good work that is being done by this department. Speaker, the Democratic Alliance supports this vote, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honourable Bosman. And now in conclusion to vote 12, I recognise the Honourable Minister.
Chairperson, Madam Chair.
Member Makamba Botja.
Sorry to interject. I would like the House to note and put on record that the EFF does not support this vote.
Duly noted. Thank you, Member. Honourable Minister.
Thank you, House Chairperson. Again, I'd like to thank the Chairperson of the Standing Committee for his contribution. But again, I would like to respond to a few matters raised by opposition members. I'd like to begin with the Honourable Peter Murray, and I'd like to assure him that we, of course, are committed to spending more on the marketing of the Western Cape. In fact, we have allocated 7 million rand more for the marketing of our province in the 2022-23 financial year. And I will certainly undertake to pay attention to how we can showcase our very diverse Cape culture in our marketing campaigns to mobilize investment, to mobilize trade, and of course to mobilize tourism in the Western Cape. Which brings me then to the Honourable Makamba Botja. I would like to assure the Honourable Member that our commitment to youth development and skills development goes far beyond and is certainly not confined to the 517 million allocated to my department, or indeed to the 32.8 million rand allocated to the skills development in the BPO sector. I'd like to refer the Honourable Member to page 171 of the overview of provincial revenue and expenditure, which cites 17 separate programs traversing youth development and skills development, which are implemented across our province and which have been allocated hundreds of millions to develop skills and to develop our youth, and I think demonstrates the very strong commitment of this government to young people in the Western Cape. Which then brings me to the Honourable Nomi Nkondlo. I'd like to begin by recognizing and thanking her for her gracious comments, both welcoming our incoming head of department, Mr. Velile Dube, but also saying goodbye and paying tribute to our outgoing head of department, Mr. Solly Fourie. On the whole question of mindset, we are certainly very proud of the work that we are doing driving foreign investment and trade, and the fact that we will be spending 127.6 million rand just in 2022-23 on boosting investment, boosting trade, and boosting tourism so that we attract more investment, expand our trade, and scale up tourism, precisely because that is what drives economic growth and job creation in the Western Cape. On the question of Delta Airlines, I would have thought that the member would have welcomed our intergovernmental dispute with national government, because there's absolutely no rational explanation to deny the application, which ultimately is costing jobs, because there's a simple formula: more tourists, more tourism, jobs for people in the Western Cape. On the whole question of red tape reduction and municipalities, I would remind the member that last week we launched a dedicated Western Cape government municipal ease of doing business fund, and will allocate 10 million rand this year to provide capacity and funding support to municipalities to make it easier for businesses, especially smaller businesses, in both the formal and the informal economy to do business in the Western Cape. On the whole question of the Pick and Pay market store program, the department has not walked away from the program, and in fact remains committed. The fact is that Pick and Pay are in the process of reviewing the market store model, which has been put in place in provinces across the country, including in the Western Cape. And of course, provided a new Pick and Pay market store model is approved, we hope that that new model will in fact be piloted right here in the Western Cape. We are aware, as the Honourable member mentioned, we are aware that some of the existing market store owners are in trouble, and we of course are committed to doing everything we can to support them together with Pick and Pay. On the whole question of the informal and township economy, we remain committed to supporting businesses, especially small businesses in the formal and in the informal economy in the Western Cape, which is precisely why we will be spending 23.5 million rand in the next financial year on the ease of doing business, which includes, for example, an SME regulatory review, which is aimed at reviewing regulation of small businesses, both in the formal and in the informal economy, to create an enabling environment so that it's easier to start a business or expand a business in the Western Cape. And which is why we're spending 23.3 million rand in the next financial year on enterprise development, which of course includes an SMME booster fund aimed at supporting both organizations and municipalities to support small businesses both in the formal and in the informal economy in the Western Cape. The SMME Booster Fund has a specific focus on small businesses in urban environments, rural environments, township environments. There's a focus on youth-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, and of course, people with disabilities in the Western Cape. House Chairperson, thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Minister Mania. And that concludes the debate on vote 12. Members, with your indulgence, we then proceed with the next order of the day. After vote 13, we will then have a 30-minute lunch break, after which we will then return for the final order of the day. I will now ask the Secretary to read the third order.
Debat oor begrotingspos 13, kultuursake en sport, Wes-Kaapse begrotingswetsontwerp.
Honourable Syed, is that a point of order?
Yes, Chair, on a point of order, Chair. Perhaps it's because I came into the chamber late, but my understanding from the programming committee when we sat on Tuesday was that we would go through the budget vote debates, but the ones that are scheduled after lunchtime will happen after lunchtime. That was my understanding, and the concern I have here is that we've invited guests who've got an interest in this particular debate, and they're only arriving at 2 o'clock because the debate was set for 2 o'clock. So the issue of bringing it forward now, because debates have happened quickly, becomes a bit problematic. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Sayed. Honourable Wenger.
Thank you, House Chairperson. I have a slightly different recollection from the Programming Authority, where we said that traditionally, when votes do run ahead of time, we can bring them forward. What we would not do is bring votes from a different day onto a particular onto a different day. So the order paper would remain the same always with those votes that were contemplated for that day. But should things run ahead, we would ask for flexibility whether a vote could come before lunch or after lunch, depending on how that vote is going and whether we're ahead or behind on the schedule. So we did have that understanding. However, we do leave it up to your discretion whether you wish to leave it at the allotted times as per the program. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honourable Wenger. That was also my understanding, and as well engaging with the Secretary as well. So I think we can accordingly, as it was set out in the Programming Authority meeting as well, proceed with vote 13 at this time, as that was the understanding of the Programming Authority. Member Sayed?
Chair, the problem here is that, particularly when it comes to a post-lunchtime debate, and it's set out there, members of the public, for them to have access, for them to listen. So, I mean, they take an interest in these debates, particularly something like cultural affairs. It does, in a sense, disadvantage members of the public who would have prepared themselves to attend. Now, people come, they travel all the way from areas, poor and working class communities, to attend a debate at 2 o'clock. By the time they get here, the debate is already over. I mean, I can't see why we cannot have lunch and then after lunch come back, because there's only 2 debates left for the day.
Member Wenger?
House Chair, we have no objection if we are to keep to the debate after lunch.
Sure. Thank you very much, Honourable Wenger. So we can then break for lunch. Honourable Sayed, just please keep in mind for future reference that what the understanding and resolution was within the Programming Authority, as we do not want to disadvantage any member of the community, but the initial agreement was that votes will not be brought forward in terms of days, but votes can be moved forward. But we will give that grace today that members would be able to attend, especially vote 13. So for now, members, we will suspend the House.
Chair, my hand is up.
Member Lekker.
Thank you, Chair. My apologies for speaking after you have made the ruling, but I've indicated much earlier, even at the time that you've given Member Wenger to speak for the second time, my hand was already up. I would like to bring to your attention that as and when there is supposed to be any changes on the program as it was, there should have been a conversation amongst the chief whips and the party leaders in the House, and such conversation did not take place. No, so I would really urge that as and when there is a possibility
Member Lekker,
of moving things up, there must be an engagement, not just taking a decision like that.
Member Lekker.
Yes.
That decision was already taken with the indulgence of the Programming Authority, that such can happen on the day, but not in terms of bringing votes forward from a different day.
I fully
agree. Thank you very much. I conclude with that. Thank you, Member. The House is now suspended for lunch. Thank you.